a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. SEPECAT Jaguar. The SEPECAT Jaguar is a British-French jet attack aircraft originally used by the British Royal Air Force and the French Air Force in the close air support and nuclear strike role. It is still in service in significantly upgraded form with the Indian Air Force. Originally conceived in the 1960s as a jet trainer with a light ground attack capability, the requirement for the aircraft soon changed to include supersonic performance, reconnaissance and tactical nuclear strike roles. A carrier-based variant was also planned for French service, but this was cancelled in favour of the cheaper Dassault Super Étendard. The airframes were manufactured by SEPECAT, a joint venture between Breguet and the British Aircraft Corporation, one of the first major joint-Anglo-French military aircraft programs. The Jaguar was exported to India, Oman, Ecuador, and Nigeria. With various air forces, the Jaguar was used in numerous conflicts and military operations in Mauritania, Chad, Iraq, Bosnia, and Pakistan, as well as providing a ready nuclear delivery platform for Britain, France, and India throughout the latter half of the Cold War and beyond. In the Gulf War, the Jaguar was praised for its reliability and was a valuable coalition resource. The aircraft served with the French Air Force as the main strike/attack aircraft until the 1st of July 2005, and with the Royal Air Force until the end of April 2007. It was replaced by the Panavia Tornado and the Eurofighter Typhoon in the RAF and the Dassault Rafale in the French Air Force. Background: the Jaguar program began in the early 1960s, in response to a British requirement for an advanced supersonic jet trainer to replace the Folland Nat T1 and Hawker Hunter T7, and a French requirement for a cheap, subsonic dual-role trainer and light attack aircraft to replace the Foucault Magister, Lockheed T-33 and Dassault Mystère 4. In both countries several companies tendered designs: BAC, Hunting, Hawker Siddeley, and Folland in Britain, Breguet, Patez, Sud Aviation, Nord, and Dassault from France. A memorandum of understanding was signed in May 1965 for the two countries to develop two aircraft, a trainer based on the ECAT, and the larger AFVG. Cross-channel negotiations led to the formation of SEPECAT in 1966 as a joint venture between Breguet and the British Aircraft Corporation to produce the airframe, though based in part on the Breguet BR.121. Using the same basic configuration and an innovative French-designed landing gear, the Jaguar was built incorporating major elements of design from BAC, notably the wing and high-lift devices. Production of components would be split between Breguet and BAC, and the aircraft themselves would be assembled on two production lines, one in the UK and one in France. To avoid any duplication of work, each aircraft component had only one source. The British light strike/tactical support versions were the most demanding design, requiring supersonic performance, superior avionics, a cutting-edge nav/attack system of more accuracy and complexity than the French version, moving map display, laser rangefinder and marked target seeker. As a result, the initial BR.121 design needed a thinner wing, redesigned fuselage, a higher rear cockpit, and afterburning engines, while putting on smiling faces for the public, maintaining the illusion of a shared design. The British design de facto departed from the French subsonic Breguet 121 to such a degree that it was for all intents and purposes a new design. A separate partnership was formed between Rolls-Royce and Turbomeca to develop the Adore afterburning turbofan engine. The BR.121 was proposed with Turbomeca's Tourmalet engine for ECAT, but Breguet preferred the RRB.172 and their joint venture would use elements of both. The new engine, which would be used for the AFVG as well, would be built in Derby and Turnos. Previous collaborative efforts between Britain and France had been complicated. The AFVG program ended in cancellation, and controversy surrounded the development of the supersonic airliner Concorde. Whilst the technical collaboration between BAC and Breguet went well, when Dassault took over Breguet in 1971, it encouraged acceptance of its own designs, such as the Super Étendard naval attack aircraft and the Mirage F1, for which it would receive more profit over the Anglo-French Jaguar. The initial plan was for Britain to buy 150 Jaguar B trainers, with its strike requirements being met by the advanced BAC Dassault AFVG aircraft, with France to buy 75 E trainers and 75 A single-seat strike attack aircraft. Dassault favoured its own Mirage G aircraft above the collaborative AFVG, and in June 1967, France cancelled the AFVG on cost grounds. This left a gap in the RAF's planned strike capabilities for the 1970s. At the same time as France's cancellation of the AFVG, Germany was expressing a serious interest in the Jaguar, and thus the design became more oriented towards the low-level strike role. The RAF had initially planned on a buy of 150 trainers. However, with both the BAC TSR-2 tactical strike aircraft and Hawker Siddeley P.1154 supersonic V/STOL fighter cancelled, the RAF were looking increasingly hard at their future light strike needs, and realizing that they now needed more than just advanced trainers with some secondary counterinsurgency capability. The RAF's strike lineup was at this point intended to consist of American General Dynamics F-111s plus the AFVG for lighter strike purposes. There was concern that both F-111 and AFVG were high-risk projects, and with the French already planning on a strike role for the Jaguar, there was an opportunity to introduce a serious backup plan for the RAF's future strike needs, the Jaguar. As a result, by October 1970, the RAF's requirements had changed to 165 single-seat strike aircraft and 35 trainers. The Jaguar was to replace the McDonnell Douglas Phantom FGR-2 in the close air support, tactical reconnaissance, and tactical strike roles, freeing the Phantom to be used for air defense. Both the French and British trainer requirements had developed significantly, and were eventually fulfilled instead by the Alpha Jet and Hawker Siddeley Hawk respectively. The French, meanwhile, had chosen the Jaguar to replace the Aéronavale's Dassault Étendard 4, and increased their order to include an initial 40 of a carrier-capable maritime version of the Jaguar M, for the Aéronavale. From these apparently disparate aims would come a single and entirely different aircraft, relatively high-tech, supersonic, and optimized for ground attack in a high-threat environment. Prototypes. The first of 8 prototypes flew on the 8th of September 1968, a 2-seat design fitted with the first production model Adore engine. This aircraft later went supersonic on its 3rd flight, but was lost on landing on the 26th of March 1970 following an engine fire. The second prototype flew in February 1969. A total of 3 prototypes appeared in flight at the Paris Air Show that year. The first French A prototype flew in March 1969. In October, a British S conducted its first flight. An M prototype flew in November 1969. The M had a strengthened airframe, an arrestor hook, and different undercarriage, twin nose wheel and single main wheels. After testing in France, it went to Rayet for carrier landing trials from their land-based catapult. In July 1970 it made real takeoffs and landings from the French carrier Clemenceau. From these trials there were doubts about the throttle response in case of an aborted landing. The shipboard testing also revealed problems with the aircraft's handling when flying on one engine, although planned engine improvements were to have rectified these problems. The M was considered a suitable replacement for the Étendard 4, but the Aéronavale would only be able to purchase 60 instead of 100 aircraft. Furthermore, the Jaguar M was expensive, limiting the size of the force the French Navy could afford. In 1971, Dassault proposed the Super Étendard, claiming that it was a simpler and cheap development of the existing Étendard 4, and in 1973, the French Navy agreed to order it instead of the Jaguar, although rising costs of the Super Étendard meant that only 71 of the planned 100 aircraft were purchased. The M was cancelled by the French government in 1973. Overview. The Jaguar is an orthodox single-seat, swept-wing, twin-engine monoplane design, with tall tricycle-type retractable landing gear. In its original configuration, it had a maximum takeoff weight in the 15-ton class and could manage a combat radius on internal fuel alone of 850 kilometers, giving the Jaguar a greater operational range than competitor aircraft such as the Mikoyan MiG-27. The aircraft had hardpoints fitted for an external weapons load of up to 10,000 pounds. Typical weapons fitted included the Matra LR.F2 rocket pod, BAP 100mm bombs, Matra AS-37 anti-radar missiles, AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles, and Rockeye cluster bombs. The RAF's Jaguars gained several new weapons during the Gulf War, including CRV-7 high-velocity rockets and American CBU-87 cluster bombs. Finally, the Jaguar was equipped with either a pair of French Deffer cannons, or alternatively British Aden cannons. The Jaguar International had the unusual optional provision for over-wing pylons, used for short-range air-to-air missiles, such as the Matra R550 Magic or the AIM-9 Sidewinder. This option frees up the under-wing pylons for other weapons and stores. RAF Jaguars gained over-wing pylons in the build-up to Operation Granby in 1990, but French Jaguars were not modified. The RAF's Jaguar 97s were intended to be wired for the carriage of ASRAAMs on the over-wing launchers, but clearance of this weapon was never completed, because of funding cuts. Engine. The SEPECAT Jaguar is powered by the Rolls-Royce Turbomeca Ecuador turbofan engine, which was developed in parallel and primarily for the Jaguar. A separate partnership was formed between Rolls-Royce and Turbomeca to develop the Ecuador, a two-shaft turbofan engine with afterburner. Twin engines were selected for survivability. Ease of maintenance was a major consideration, an engine change being possible within 30 minutes. For the Jaguars it needed a high bypass capable of high thrust for takeoff, supersonic flight and low-level dashes. When the first prototype Jaguar flew on the 8th of September 1968, it was also the first flight for the engine. In its initial development the Ecuador engine had complications with the stability of the afterburner system, and shipboard testing showed slow throttle response times, problematic in the situation of an aborted landing. Engine improvements rectified these problems prior to the Jaguar coming into service. In French service, the Jaguars were introduced using the original Mk.101 engine. RAF Jaguars entered service using the Mk.102 engine, mainly featuring better afterburner throttle control over the Mk.101. The RAF later had its Jaguars re-engined around 1981 with the improved Ecuador Mk.104, and again in 1999 with the Mk.106, each providing greater performance. The Ecuador was developed into both afterburning and non-afterburning models. The BAE Hawk, which had beaten the Jaguar to fulfill the Air Staff Target 362 trainer requirement, also adopted the non-afterburning Ecuador engine developed for the Jaguar. The Ecuador engine found use in several aircraft abroad, such as the McDonnell Douglas T-45 Goshawk, the Mitsubishi T2, and the Mitsubishi F1, even following the Jaguar's retirement in Europe. The Ecuador continues to be an active product with new variants being developed. As of February 2013, the Indian Air Force was considering fitting 125 Jaguars with new Honeywell F-125 in engines. Avionics. From the outset the Jaguar was equipped with a navigation and attack system. While versions had a reliable double gyroscopic system and a Doppler radar derived from the Mirage EE, the GR1s had a totally new digital system with an inertial navigation system and a heads-up display, plus LRMTS in the nose. These systems were a step above the current technology of the time, but reliability was quite low. There were many more systems added with the time, like the Atlas II in the French aircraft, and, in 1994-95, some GR1s had laser designator systems fitted. Missiles like AS-30 and even the anti-ship Sea Eagle were added. Some IAF aircraft had the Agave radar system, purposely for maritime strike. India later developed the Darren system in its Jaguar fleet, with a modern 1,553 data booths. Although in operational theaters such as the Gulf War the Jaguar proved to be mechanically more reliable than the Panavia Tornado, The aircraft's avionics were a hindrance to conducting missions. Owing to the Jaguar's shortcomings in navigation and target acquisition, French Jaguars had to be escorted by Dassault Mirage F-1's reconnaissance aircraft to act as guides. The Jaguar provided a valuable component of the campaign. The RAF detachment of 12 Jaguars flew 612 combat sorties, with no aircraft lost. Significant changes were made both during and shortly after the war. Owing to obsolete navigational systems being unable to provide the accuracy required, both French and British Jaguars were quickly modified with global positioning system receivers, a recent technology at the time. Prior to 1995 NATO bombing campaign in Bosnia and Herzegovina known as Operation Deliberate Force, a dozen Jaguars were upgraded with the capability to carry the tiled laser designator pod and redesignated Jaguar GR-1B or T-2B respectively. Shortly afterwards, the RAF upgraded its Jaguar fleet to a common standard, incorporating tiled and the ability to use new reconnaissance pods. The interim GR-3 upgrade added a new HUD, a new hand controller and stick top, integrated GPS and terrain referenced navigation. The further upgraded Jaguar GR introduced the new EOGP-1 digital reconnaissance pod, a helmet-mounted sight, improved cockpit displays, a data link, and improved night vision goggles compatibility. A single Jaguar was converted into the Jaguar active control technology with fly-by-wire controls and aerodynamic alterations to the airframe. The aerodynamic instability improved maneuverability and the test data was used in the development of the Eurofighter. France. The French Air Force took delivery of the first production Jaguar in 1973, one of an eventual 160 single-seat Jaguars. For type conversion training, France also took 40 of the two-seat Jaguar E. While the Jaguar was capable of carrying a single and 52 nuclear bomb, the French government did not assign any Jaguars for use in the Force de Frappe, France's strategic nuclear deterrent. This task was carried out by the Dassault Mirage 4, and the later Mirage 2000N nuclear-armed Jaguars were instead assigned the pre-strategic role to clear a path for the strategic strike force. The N-52 nuclear bomb was retired from service in September 1991, when the formerly nuclear-armed squadrons of Escadron de Chasse 7 then concentrated on conventional attack. French Jaguars also performed in the role of electronic countermeasures aircraft, bearing the Martel anti-radiation missile. Capable of staying airborne to suppress enemy defenses for long periods of time through mid-air refueling. In French service, the Jaguar was frequently deployed in defense of national interests in Africa during the 1970s, a policy sometimes referred to as Jaguar diplomacy. Jaguars made their combat debut against Polisario Front forces in Mauritania in December 1977, as part of Opération Le Matin. In August 1978 a conventionally armed rapid reaction squadron was established, intended to deploy in support of French forces and interests to anywhere in the world. One Jaguar was shot down in 1978 by an SA-7 missile of the Polisario Front. France had been involved in the conflict in Chad for many years, and 2,000 men of the Force d'Intervention along with helicopters and Jaguars were deployed to defend central Chad in 1978. Further forces arriving later as part of Opération Tacourt. The Jaguars were engaged in May and June 1978, contributing significantly in halting an offensive by Gaucanajuedes Frolinart forces, who were routed. One aircraft was shot down, but the pilot was recovered by helicopter. In support of the further military action in the region, known as Operation Manta, Jaguars were deployed to Bangui, Central African Republic, in 1983, before being rebased inside Chad at N'Djamena International Airport. On the 25th of January 1984, Jaguars attacked a rebel column that was withdrawing after raiding the town of Zigi. One aircraft was shot down and the pilot, Captain Michel Crocky, was killed. The Libyans denied involvement. The Manta forces were withdrawn in 1984, as part of a de-escalation agreement, whereby both Libyan and French forces were to be withdrawn from Chad. The Libyans did not respect the agreement, and Jaguars returned to Chad in 1986, as part of Operation Epervier, this time with a more forceful role. On the 16th of February 1986, 11 Jaguars, escorted by Mirage F-1 fighters and supported by C-135F tankers and Breguet Atlantic aircraft, launched to raid on the airfield at Wadi Doum, which the Libyans had constructed in northern Chad, using BAP-100 anti-runway bombs. In response to Libyan incursions, another strike was carried out on the 7th of January 1987, when a Jaguar destroyed a Libyan radar with a Martel missile. The Jaguars stationed at N'Djamena were a target for Libyan sabotage owing to their effectiveness against enemy forces, but the attempts were unsuccessful, as France was not then a full member of NATO. Joint operations with British Jaguars were limited in the 1980s. Jaguars from France were dispatched to participate in several coalition campaigns in the 1990s, from the 1991 Gulf War to the 1999 Kosovo conflict. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?